Welcome to the Mason Duchatschek Show. This episode is brought to you by Workforce Alchemy, helping leaders improve hiring, engagement, and retention while uncovering people-related profit leaks that are hidden in everyday operations. Today's guest, Joshua Altman, is the Managing Director of Beltway Media, a Washington, D.C.-based communications firm that works with everyone from startups to federal agencies, including the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Department of Commerce. Before founding the firm, he was a multimedia journalist at The Hill, covering major federal policy beats and election cycles. Welcome. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
So you said communication shapes perception and trust. When a leadership team gets that wrong, what usually breaks first inside the business?
Something's already broken when that goes wrong. Because what you're trying to do on the outside and inside with trust is shape perception. When something's broken, you don't have that well of trust to fall back on, which is what you really need in a crisis moment when news breaks about your company, when something happens internally with your internal stakeholders, with employees, with investors.
Okay.
You need that to fall back on. So a lot of things could have gone wrong. Usually it is in the communications side because you weren't messaging that properly to the proper people.
So a lot of companies think that communication is just marketing. What's the difference between marketing, branding, and the broader communications function that leaders often miss?
So what we do is we are chief communications officers, and that is the focus on shaping perception and building and maintaining trust. A lot of people are probably more familiar with the chief marketing officer, the chief brand officer. What you're seeing now is a lot more companies, big companies, Fortune 500s, major sports franchises, top tier universities, incorporating all of that under a single chief communications officer. It could be a full-time person. It could be someone like us who comes in fractional. But that is all in one, bring it all together. Marketing is one part of that. There's a lot of overlap between marketing and branding, and because they're all part of that communication. So branding, it's what your company believes, why it exists, how consumers feel, its loyalty, its long-term engagement. What we call in our story narrative brand framework, brand is the swag. It's everything people interact with about your company. They identify your brand, they create that association. Marketing itself are the strategies to build awareness about the products and services and promoting the brand. Everything about your company is part of your marketing, all those messages. So the social media interactions, customer service calls and chats, even those AI chatbots, those are part of the marketing. Personal relationships, it's all there. So it kind of all flows up and down. It's all part of communications, and these are different aspects of that communications function.
I wrote a book in, I think it was around 2014 called Attract, Capture, Convert. And I had a conversation with a gentleman out of St. Louis by the name of Scott Colby. And the general gist of that conversation was that brands are becoming their own media outlets.
Mhm.
And one of the examples back then, and one I cited in the book then, and it has been prophetic, and I have the receipts because I wrote about it over 10 years ago, was how Red Bull created their own media empire. I mean, they've got their own events. They've got coverage of their own events. They've got branding throughout all of the venues where their events take place, whether it's the Red Bull Rampage or whether it's whatever sport they've got going. And I saw this coming a long time ago. And there's that old saying, the best day to plant a tree was like 100 years ago. The next best day is today. So for companies that haven't realized this yet, today's the next best day to start adopting that mindset, if you ask me.
It is. A lot of people come to us when I talk about a story narrative brand framework. Story is it's what you tell your friends at the bar. Narrative answers questions, it builds connections, and brand has all that stuff. It's the swag. It's all that stuff that people interact with. People come to us frequently at the brand stage. And we could do a lot once you're there. But like you said, the best time was 100 years ago to plant the tree. The best time to start your communications and to work with someone like a fractional chief communications officer is from the beginning, because we can work with companies up to say 250 employees, at which point bringing this in-house full-time starts to make more sense. But we can work with you, 5 hours a month, 20 hours a week or more, depending on your stage and your needs. One of the things people think about is, well, we're small, we can't afford it, we don't need it because we are, a one pizza business still. Well, that's the time to start this, because that's when you really start shaping perception, building and maintaining trust. That's all there.
And with
And you have to do it from
technology
the beginning,
and with technology, you can broadcast from, well,
anywhere.
I'm in Florida right now, and I'm reaching all over people all over the world. Like, the technology gives the small business the ability to compete on that same global platform as the big companies. It's
It
amazing.
does. It's something that wasn't there 10, 15 years ago. Live streaming today is, we're doing it basically. You just set up webcams, it's iPhones, it's easy. The first time I did a live stream, decade plus, 15 plus years ago, every camera needed its own computer, dedicated computer. They all needed dedicated hardline internet. We couldn't use Wi-Fi. It wasn't nearly strong enough. We ran out of chairs because every computer had to sit on something and have a wire that was close enough. I was sitting on the floor managing it because we literally ran out of places to sit. We used them all for the equipment. Now we do it on an iPhone. So you really can compete and bring someone in 5 hours a month, 10 hours a month at that really early stage to help build that great foundation. So when you are a 100-person, 150-person company, you're there already. You're not coming back from behind thinking we have the brand. Now we got to start. What was our story again? How did we do this?
I
You
think
want to already be there.
and I think a lot of companies are overestimating simple how easy it is to do simple well. Several years ago, I'm guessing several, probably even 6 or 7 ago, I had the chance to spend a little time with Kevin Harrington. He was on, Shark Tank season 1. He was the king of infomercials, if you will, and he was talking to a group of people, and he wrote a book, I think it was called Act Now. So this was right after his book came out. But anyway, he was talking about how he sold billions of dollars worth of product through infomercials using cameras and camera equipment that's not as good as the stuff that's on your cell phone camera in your pocket. So the technology is not a limiter for businesses that see the need to utilize media effectively in any way, shape, or form, if you ask me. But
It's not. And one thing we've actually really been seeing a lot of, and we talk about this in our newsletter almost every week because it is so important right now, is authenticity. It's big, and not big in the what's the thing of the moment. It's what we've always wanted. But because there is so much inauthentic content now, what has been termed AI slop, that anything real, genuine, authentic is what people really connect. And there is almost the problem where people are going for too much production, where it looks too good and people don't buy it as being from the company, as being real,
right,
where you don't want to have that Hollywood look on your Instagram video. You want something that is much more from you. It has to still be good. You still have to be able to see someone clearly. You still have to be able to hear them clearly. Basic lights, basic sound, pretty good. But those basic lights are like $30. If you don't happen to have one of those around you, you're recording somewhere that you're out, you could probably turn a light that's in a room onto you and do fine. That audio that's good enough, don't use most cases you can't use the one that's built into your phone, but a little earbud works great in most cases, and it's clear enough, and it gets that authenticity out there because you're not looking like you did this in a Hollywood studio. You're looking real, and people want it.
agreed. So when you walk into an organization that has siloed messaging across leadership, sales, marketing, and operations, what are the first signs that the company's paying a real business cost for that misalignment?
Usually they don't know what the other one is doing. If you were to ask, what is your sales team talking about? The marketing team might not know. Where are these materials you're creating going? If you're asking the marketing team, how are they used? They might have some idea, but they're not necessarily knowing 100%. Your HR internal comms team might not know what's going out externally as well as they should. So if you just start asking those questions and you're sitting there looking at everything they've produced in all these departments in the last year, you'll see that they aren't 100% on the same page. The messages might be slightly different. And you need something slightly different for internal versus external. Because obviously your internal employees, they're going to know things differently. They need information that's different. But sometimes the themes don't align. Sometimes you have things like a product is coming out in 2 years as they're planning it, but the communications wasn't really ready for it until a month or two, 3 months beforehand. And they really could have been laying that public groundwork on that product marketing for a lot longer. And some companies do that part well. Some do the misalignment between internal and external differently. So it's always something like that. Every company, of course, based on size and industry, is going to be a little different. But the number one is they don't know clearly and quickly what their other departments are talking about.
I'm going to go there. I think that most companies are vastly underutilizing their media presence, and there is a teachable moment in what you just described. Years ago, I went to a seminar by a guy named Mike Koenigs, who I've always found has been a few years ahead of the curve, and he's pretty much been right about almost everything as far as my experience with him has been. And he has always had the ability to look ahead and see trends. And years ago, I remember when organizations were teaching sales training, and it was, develop rapport with a prospect, ask leading questions, identify what their hot buttons are, and then feed back to them the solutions of how your business can help them solve those problems. Well, what Mike Kinney said is, he goes, people aren't sitting around waiting for salespeople to call them anymore. They're
Yeah.
exactly, they're going on the internet and they're looking for solutions to their problems. And he said, if you can identify the 10 most frequently asked questions that your prospects have and give them the best answers, then take a look and create the list of the 10 should ask questions. Those are the questions your prospects should be asking, but they don't know what they don't know yet. And if you truly are the subject matter expert, provide them with the answers to those questions. So that will establish your credibility at a higher level. And now you got 20 questions. And in a lot of cases, those 20 questions are going to be pretty much, if you really know your prospects' needs and you know about your company's ability to fill those needs, then you can have a consistent message that is congruent, that answers the things that people need to know before they buy from you. And you're not having to worry about having all these different people saying different things different ways. And he was prophetic about that. And he was talking about that stuff 10, 15 years ago. And he was right about
Now
that.
we look at the answer engines, the AEO, GEO, and the people searching on AI. How do I do this? What is the product that will fix this problem? That is now what we're telling companies, and not just us, this is industry wide, to optimize for, because those are triggered by someone's question. And if you think about this, I'm going to date myself a little here, is this was Ask Jeeves, 20 something years ago, is they tried to teach us how to just put a question in and get the answer. Now, and I was just reading, they officially shut down recently,
Oh,
Ask Jeeves. They were running in some form, but they actually just recently shuttered the whole thing. We were being prepped for this 20 something years ago, whenever that was. And now that's what we're back to, because Google then trained us on keywords,
yes,
just
they
put
did.
in the keywords. And now we're back to give it a long sentence question mark, what Jeeves tried to get us to do.
Right.
And now that's what we're actually optimizing for. And you put that on your homepage, on internal pages, FAQ sections. It has to be structured properly. Just having it is not enough.
What
You,
other tips might you give for people that are listening in that area? Are there a couple hot tips that you might share other than what you just touched on?
in terms of structuring it,
Yeah.
it has to do with HTML structures. It has to do with things like schema. It has to do with markups. It has to do with how you format the page. Call someone to do it for you. Call us.
Fair enough.
Doing it yourself is not a quick task, especially if you have a large website with a lot of stuff on it.
Okay. Fair enough. So you've worked with both startups and federal agencies. What lessons from high stakes public sector communication translate surprisingly well to private sector leadership?
Review everything. Take time. Don't just push publish. In the public sector, there are a lot of layers of review. On the private sector, there's less so. Sometimes almost no layers of review. There's a good balance between those two. When
Okay.
we do social media accounts, and I did this myself when I was running one for a newspaper, everything had a 1 minute delay, even if it was breaking everything. If it was, 12:02, we set it plus, so we had at least 60 seconds and it would not publish till 12:04. This way it gave us enough time to read it again,
Nice.
stop it if we had to, rewrite it if we needed, then it would go through that 1 minute again. So if it was 12:02, we didn't set it to 12:03. We made sure we had the full 60 seconds of 12:03 before something went live. Read it, reread it, read it out loud. If you have time, have someone else read it. Do not trust this to an AI, because AI is trained to tell you that you are absolutely right. Do not leave this to the machine. Have a real person who
Nice.
isn't you do it.
Okay. So what does a strong message architecture actually look like in practice for a growing company that wants every employee, partner, and customer to hear a consistent story?
We start with the story, narrative, brand framework. If you're listening to this, you could do this yourself. Take a piece of paper, divide it into three. Put story on one, narrative on the other, brand. Just go to story, just write out the facts, the beginning, the middle, the present. The narrative, answer those questions that are left, connect the stories. What do you want people to know? And then brand, what's the swag? What do people actually connect with?
Okay.
Write it out. This is something you could read, this is what we'll take you through at the very beginning. Do that. The other that you can do is we work on what are called our four language model, what people read, see, hear, and experience. If you want to touch everything, those are the big four. And again, you could do this yourself. Take a piece of paper, do 4 boxes. Or if you have a lot of stuff, front and back, 2 and 2. What do people read? That's what we're most intuitive about. That's what people really kind of get. It's stuff you read. What do you see? A lot of it's reading, but it's visuals, it's pictures, it's video, it's all of that. What do you hear? Podcasts are a great example. We're doing one right now, but also companies are really investing. If you have brick and mortar retail, if you have a place that people go, there's a lot of research being done, and big national chains are really investing in their in-store audio experience and tailoring it to individual aisles across individual stores. So what you get on one part of town, it might just not be playing the same playlist nationwide. What might be playing on the east side of town isn't what might be playing on the west side of town. They're really doing a lot of research into optimizing that so people stay and people buy, but also don't stay too long because you've got to get them through the store so more people come in. But it's to optimize that purchase, which goes to the last part, which is experience. And people think of that mostly as experiential things, in-store audio, something you experience, experiential events, pop-ups, conferences. But it's also, because it is that, but it's also how do you experience, what do you read, see, and hear? So we're doing this podcast. Someone like me will never watch a podcast. I listen. I'm a podcast listener. I listen when I drive. I listen when I walk the dog. 2 things I shouldn't be sitting and watching something. But I definitely am a listener. Someone else is going to tune in and sit and watch it. We're getting the same information. We're having a completely different experience.
That's a good point. Can you share maybe an example of how a company can go from chaotic outreach to a more disciplined communication system without becoming robotic or losing their personality that makes them authentic?
Start simple. You do not have to overhaul everything in one day because you didn't build it in one day. The first thing you're going to do is we're going to focus on more authentic video content. And that's where we're starting. Do that because that's bite size, because video isn't going everywhere. You might have TikTok, you might have your Instagram, you might have it on LinkedIn and your own company pages, depending on the platforms that work for you. But that is one thing that you can start with. Then, how do you repurpose? We always talk about content repurposing because it makes your life a lot easier. You do not have to come up with something fresh every single time. Think about how you could take one thing and use it again and again in different ways.
I was listening to Alex Hormozy because that used to be a hang up for me. It's like, well, I've already said this, or I've already talked about that. And what Hormozy said is that people like to be reminded and people forget. And it's a mistaken assumption to assume that, hey, if I put out an article a year ago or a video a year ago that talked about one particular set of circumstances, that everybody in my sphere of influence has seen it.
They probably haven't seen it
That's
because
my
of how these
point.
algorithms work. But also, let's say they did see it. Let's say you are posting every month, if you're in the beer distribution business and you're posting every month about beer distribution, you're posting about trucks and the trucking industry, because that is going to be very important if you're moving product across the country. Well, guess what? If someone notices that you are posting about that a lot, that is great. They are paying attention to you. They are paying attention to your content and they are engaging. There are no content police. No one is going to stop you from doing this. And if they notice, that means you're getting your message across.
I'm gonna
The
butcher
odds of someone really caring that, posting like, well, you said this a month ago and, criticizing you for it on Instagram is let them. If they do, all that's going to do is drive more clicks.
I'm gonna take a stab at a joke that is very relevant here. But there was a joke about this church, and they got this new pastor, and he was kind of old, and he got up and amongst a bunch of fanfare, he got up and delivered a sermon on Sunday. And then the next weekend, he delivered the exact same sermon. And the next Sunday, he delivered the exact same sermon. And all the elders of the church, like, what's going on here? Is there something wrong with him? Does he not know that he's delivered the exact same sermon 3 days in a row? And so finally, like after the fourth Sunday in a row of the same sermon, they said something to him like, hey, you know, are you aware that you delivered the exact same sermon 4 times in a row to the exact same audience? He's like, yeah. And until they start listening and doing, applying what I'm teaching them, they're not ready for new material.
Yeah.
I get it. For a CEO listening right now, they know whether they have a communication problem, a clarity problem, or a leadership problem disguised as a communication problem.
You're probably going to need someone to come in and help you because we are all very biased, too biased when it comes to ourselves, when it comes to looking at our own communication, when it comes to looking at our own business, especially if you are a founder or early employee. If you've grown that a significant amount, let's say if you're the president of a 150 person, 200 person business and you've grown it from 50, you've been there, you are biased. I say that about myself and ourself and our business, looking at it. You cannot be objective when you do it. So you got to bring someone in to look at it and tell you, because that's the only way you're going to really know
And
what's going on.
different data points. I had a gentleman, I haven't aired this episode yet, but it's coming out soon. His name was Jonathan Maxim, and he was the CEO of Viral App Launch. And he made a comment that I found incredibly refreshing, because we were talking about things like this and data. And he's like, I don't even care about my own opinion. I care about what the data says and what the truth is. And I was just like, wow, you've got a guy who's a CEO who says, I quote, I don't care about my own opinion. Like, I have to be above it for the benefit of the business. I have to pay attention to what the data is telling me and what other folks are telling me. Now, he's making decisions on it, but he's not making his decisions like I feel or I think. He's like, this is what the data says is happening, and it's right in front of him. And in this particular case, someone who is not biased makes it
Yeah.
easier to give feedback. So I'm with you on that.
Data, we do a lot of stuff that's data-driven, behavioral science-based, but we don't let it give us a false sense of security, and we don't pass that false sense of security onto our clients. Because a lot of what we do, you do have to make inferences. You can look at it and you could see, the number of clicks something got, the number of opens something had. You could look at distribution over time. You could take that and turn that into, return on ad spend. You could return that into your cost to acquire. You could turn it into all those things, but it is not the be all end all. It is just raw data. You could put that into a computer and it could crunch the numbers and give you some results, but don't let it give you that false sense of, well, the data says. In some cases, we had this many products, we sold that many of them, it cost, we returned that number of dollars. That is pretty much there.
That's
But
the
for
kind
a
of
lot
stuff that's for the record,
yeah,
that's the kind of stuff he was talking about. He
yeah,
was
that
going,
kind of
hey,
stuff you have much more direct. We shipped, 100 widgets to the store at this number of dollars. We sold 75 of them at that number of dollars. We made this amount of profit, and it cost, in total, human time. You could calculate all that. You could figure it out. For a lot of what we do, it is very easy to fall into a false sense of security just looking at data, because it can't give you the whole picture. Qualitative information, talking with people, talking with your customers, talking with other stakeholders can tell you a lot too, because you need that as well. So yes, we use the data, we look at it, but it is, with what we're doing in communications, can't be the be all end all decision maker. It is something that informs the conversation and bringing in the human experts who can tell you this is what it means. This is how this compares to this quarter last year and the year before and our projections. Because you need the person to really put that into context, much more than looking at shipping and dollar spend.
Yeah, he was very specific in things like, I think his opinion would be, I think my opinion, this particular ad for this particular market will be great for males age 17 to 25. And then he finds out it's females age 65 and older that bought 2 to 1. I mean, so that's where he's like, my opinion doesn't matter. It's what the data tells me. But I understand what you're saying. So what are the biggest mistake that leaders make when they only start thinking seriously about communication after a crisis has already started?
That they can quickly stop it, that crisis, because you can't always. Sometimes the internet moves on, the news cycle moves on, and people forget about you. That's kind of a hope in a lot of cases when you have a crisis. Sometimes it doesn't. And you kind of need to be able to figure out what you need to do and who you need among your stakeholders to interact with and prioritize, which can be a little confusing because it might not mean directly interacting with those stakeholders. If you're a business that has shareholders, public or private, and you have some kind of public crisis, communicating information with your shareholders could be very public communication to satisfy concerns of customers, because they're concerned about customers going to keep buying. Their concerns are just as much about that public perception. So you need to make sure that you're going in both places in that. You're communicating to them, but your shareholders, but also making sure that their concerns are satisfied in that public external communications as well. But
I remember that. Now you talked about dating yourself about Ask Jeeves. I'm going to throw one out. I remember when Tylenol went through its issues. People had tampered with Tylenol.
yeah,
And they took all that stuff off the shelves. If I recall correctly, they took all that stuff off the shelves. I'm sure huge financial loss, because they wanted, the message that they sent off is, we take this seriously, we care about your health, and we're not going to put anything out there that, like, it was actually they made lemonade out of lemons. And I'm
that's
sure,
what you kind of have to do in a lot of cases. Is we're going to take that short-term hit of whatever number of dollars that product is worth and pull it off the shelf. Because if you're a healthcare company like that, you are 100% built on trust and if people taking your product. You cannot have that long term with people not trusting it, because there won't be a long term for
right.
that product.
When you think about crisis communication, what separates the organizations that come out stronger from the ones that damage trust for years?
They've prepared. And that's what we do with companies is we think of it like a fire drill. We do crisis communication plans, strategies, drills, walkthroughs, we do it all. And the ones who come out of the crisis better are the ones who have done that process and prepared, which doesn't mean you are going to prepare for every crisis. You could probably prepare for the biggest ones. If you are a company that has, customer data, which is most companies now, because you might have, payment data, you have addresses where stuff is going, if you're shipping, you have some data.
Right.
And that leaks, you could probably anticipate that is one of your potential crises. What you probably won't anticipate is your executive being called at a Coldplay concert where he shouldn't be. That would probably not on your list that you drilled. It might be now, but it wasn't before. So you have that sort of, fill in the blank drill, like what can't we anticipate and what is the template we can use for a lot of situations so it's done and we all know it. The best hope for this is like a fire drill. We put it on a shelf. We practice it quarterly, twice a year, whatever your cadence is. We make sure it's still relevant, that new hires know about the plan. And then we put it back on the shelf and take it out at the next check and do the same thing. We hope it never gets used. But just like in the event of a real fire, it's there and everyone knows what to do when it happens.
So AI is changing how teams produce content. We touched on this a
Yes.
little bit and manage information. Where do you see AI creating real value in communications, and where is human judgment still completely non-negotiable?
AI is a great tool. That's all it is. It is a tool. It's great for certain things. It's great at outlines. It's really great for research. We used it when we had to get information, I think it was 2025 cities, basic demographic information on markets, race demographics, age, income, all of that. Well, that's basically running a lot of Google searches for the city, state, national records. Take a person a long time to do that. We plugged it into an AI, told it what we needed to do, the only sources it could check. We limited that. You can only get information from these public records. And we gave it the list of, City Department of Public Health or equivalent, whatever that city calls it, State Department of Vital Statistics or whatever they call it. And we gave it a bunch of options. And verify everything, give it to us back with the source. But one of the downsides with AI in that situation, where you have to be very careful with things like research, is it doesn't know if we were telling it Rome, Georgia, Rome, New York, or Rome, Italy. You
Gotcha.
have to be very specific with what you tell it. And it could very easily return Paris, France, or Paris, Texas. So you really have to give it correct information. But it's just a tool. And when we think about it that way, it becomes a lot more understandable. We use it for what it's good for. We don't use a screwdriver to hammer in a nail. We use a
Perfect.
hammer.
So leaders always want ROI. How should executives measure whether stronger communication is actually driving growth, confidence, and better decision making across business? What's your thoughts on that?
There are a couple of ways. Do focus groups, talk with customers. Do they know? You could do sentiment analysis on social media pages if you're active there and if it has a reasonable chance of giving you good data, because it might not. Also, factor into that, a lot of times the people who write back are the people complaining. So negative sentiment might not be actually reflective of your customers. It could be trolls or bots. You need to factor that into the analysis. But a lot of times, you can't see the direct result.
Okay.
If you're doing crisis communication planning and you have that fire drill ready, well, if you don't have the crisis, a lot of people say, well, it wasn't worth it. We paid for, however much money to do this planning. We didn't use it. We don't need it anymore. Well, no, you still do, because you might still have that crisis. I talked at the beginning about this, about building up a well of trust. Just because you haven't tapped into that yet doesn't mean it's not really good to have it there and to keep building it. Because if you don't keep building it, it'll drain, which means you have to keep putting stuff out to make sure that people trust your company and the products. Again, you could ask people in focus groups and online surveys, do you trust Acme Corp? And get a result. But you don't necessarily really know if that's accurate and how deep that trust runs until you have a crisis or it's put to the test. Hopefully, it never actually happens and you never really have to test it. And people might see that and say, well, why are we paying for it? Because, we don't have to use it. Yes, you do. It just hasn't happened yet. Everyone thinks it'll never happen. And that's when it does, as we all know from our own lives.
Sure. I mean, you don't have to think that back that far to the name everybody recognizes, Boeing. So you spent years in journalism before leading a communications firm. How did reporting on policy and elections shape the way you now advise leaders on clarity, credibility, and message discipline?
The core ways people communicate are basically the same. We like stories. We like connecting with people. If you watch politicians, especially on the campaign trail, they'll talk about Mary in Peoria. They'll talk about Joe in Little Rock, and they'll tell these stories and attach people to them. That's because it works.
Okay.
And the same thing works on the business side. Give people a story. You saw testimonials. A great example that we probably all saw is when TikTok had the chance of shutting down, and it did shut down for like a day or day and a half. TikTok itself was putting out ads showing business owners who built their whole business on TikTok and who would be negatively affected if it shut down. Because putting that face and that name and that business, small business with that there connected with people. So forging those connections worked. Another thing I learned a lot was I was a multimedia producer. I worked in video, I worked in web, I worked in social, I worked in the intersection of all those things. And it was how to bring all those together to effectively communicate a story and a message.
You know what? I'm not the type to call politicians out, but I can remember some stories being shoved down our throat. But you mentioned authenticity earlier, and I don't know that I'm any different from most people watching or listening today, but when I felt that those were inauthentic stories being shoved down my throat, it backfired for me.
It does have that chance. Yeah.
And I think that the had it been authentic and real, it probably would have worked. But I didn't think for a second it was authentic or real. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But
Well,
again, I'm
now
not
they're
calling
bringing out real people more. You see
what's
that?
that?
They're using real people in ads and social media ads. They're using those people who the stories were about to actually tell it much more online. And they're using user generated content in that way. And businesses are doing the same thing.
There was a this is my favorite question, and I always save it for the end because everyone has a different answer, and I'm fascinated to hear what yours is. Because I know that you've got incredibly valuable experience, insights that are applicable to a whole bunch of different people listening and watching. If there was only one piece of advice that you could give to people who are listening, and again, it's primarily business owners, CEOs, executives, what would be the most important piece of advice that you would give and why?
Be the signal, not the noise.
Can you
And the
expound on
reason,
that?
yeah, the reason for that, I say that that is the piece of advice is this is the golden age of content, I've heard it's called. There's more content out there now produced than ever. Once you factor in all the social media channels, all the online content, all the individual creators, there is more. So we've also trained ourselves as users. I know I've done this. I'm sure you've done this. I'm sure listeners have done this to scroll past so much stuff on our
Absolutely,
phones, on our
100%.
computers. And
Yes.
because most of it's noise and most of it is not relevant to us and most of it's not valuable. So when I say be the signal, I mean be the thing that gives people a good reason to stop. Provide value. Everything we do, and this goes into every project we work on, should provide value. So if you're doing an ad that says buy our widget isn't the best ad because it's not providing value. Tell me why. Give me a reason. Show me something. Video ads can do that well. Even static Google ads can do that well. We're going to see how well soon AI ads and those ads into the AI chat responses are able to do it. And they give you value. They give you the answer or an answer and then lead you to take the action of going to the website, making a purchase, requesting the quote, whatever it is you need to do. But that is where it comes down to is once everything is useful that you're doing provides that value, now you're the signal, you're giving people the reason to stop and pay attention to you.
If people wanna know more about you, your company, the work that you do, what are the best ways for them to contact you, engage with you, and learn more about what you can do to help them? What are the best ways for anybody listening or watching to interact and learn more about you and your company?
Check out our website, beltway.media, no.com. You can also email me,jaltman at beltway.media, again, no.com. I'm on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Joshua I. Altman. You could also check us out on most social media channels, on Instagram, on Substack. We're at the Comms Chief on pretty much all of them.
Awesome. It has been wonderful to spend time with you this afternoon. I appreciate you immensely, and hopefully let's stay in touch and do this again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Have a great day.